So, hi guys, welcome to Learning Web Designs and Security with Fixigeo Security. Today's episode is titled Installing Laravel and Integrating Laravel Jetstream on the Laravel application. So, as we promised on our last month's episode, that we would be introducing briefly on how to use this framework to build web applications. And the purpose of doing this is because we want you to have the fundamentals, or should we say the basic knowledge of using this framework before we introduce you to our core proper training on our paid courses on web dev and security. So today's training, we will be briefly introducing a few of the concepts of this framework, which has to do with its history, a few important websites or links that you need to download files that are very essential for you to install this framework locally on your machine. And lastly, we would be integrating the Laravel Jetstream, which has a cool UI that replicates a live web application that has basic functionalities such as login and registration forms. So nothing of a core coding that will be done today. It's just the basic installation. And subsequently, when we'll be talking about this framework, we'll be showing you a few snippet codes on how you can, run certain functions or code structure with this framework. But for a proper web application, full stage web application that is built and pushed to a production server, that we will be talking on our paid courses, because that is something that is very unique and we have to take our time to map out every structure, right from the foundations down to the deployment or staging of a web application. So with that being said, let's get started. So briefly, introduction of the course outline for today is that we'll be dealing with Laravel 12, which is the latest update or version of the Laravel application. And after that, we'll be talking about a few essential URLs that are necessary to download packages, which are very important to, run various package, or should we say files, that are components of this framework to run efficiently on your local server, which is the web server in this case we're using. But you should also note that these same packages are important and also necessary when you try to push your project on a live server, which in this case you're staging on a live environment. Okay, so whatever we do here today in terms of the installation can also be replicated on a live server. Then lastly, we will walk you through on how to install this Laravel framework on your WAMP server and show you the difference between the installation of this Laravel application itself and after we have integrated the Laravel Jetstream into our web application. So this is all we're going to be talking about today. Just a brief introduction, not to waste much of your time, and as well expose you straight forward into the project itself. So a brief introduction of Laravel. So Laravel was founded by Taylor Otwell, and this framework has been in existence for over a decade and a half. The beauty about this framework is that it's centered on PHP and has a structural designs that adopts the MVC architecture. So when we talk about the MVC, we're talking about the model, the view, and the controllers. And not just the MVC architecture, it also works on a few of the concepts of using the templating engine, which is the Blade. So if you are familiar with web applications or websites, you know that we have on the front end, we have the .html files. So this renders the structure, right? Which is the skeletal structure of the website. Now, when you're writing a website basically on PHP, you have to understand that there are ways you have to write HTML syntax so that these PHP files can render this HTML syntax and of course display them back on the front end, right? So this is where the Laravel Blade templating comes in. So the engine of this framework, supports the concept of the blade.php. And this blade.php is how we render the front end of HTML syntaxes and CSS and JavaScript on the front end of this web application. So there is no need, or there are no need for you to be writing the .html files. You just have to write the blade.php, and these blade.php files are basically gonna be rendered on the front end depending on what function you're calling on the routing structure of the code. So there are other things that Laravel does, but the most unique part of Laravel is that it supports the eloquent object relational mapping when dealing with databases. So basically, if you're very familiar with SQL, which is the structured query language, you know that if you're going to write SQL language or codes to read data from the database, you have to write codes that has to connect first to the database. Then, of course, write the PHP function that calls these various tables or columns, depending on what you want to render on the front end to the user. But with eloquent object relational mapping, database interaction becomes very seamless and very beautiful. So you do not rely on writing SQL languages or code. You focus on using the PHP functions or syntax to, call these various tables or columns from the database. So if you're very familiar on, let's say, how you can pass data using PHP code, you can just say user : find, then you can say where ID equals to 1, stuff like that. So this is one of the beautiful things about the Laravel framework. And this was built based on the limitations of Code Igniter, which is also a PHP framework that has some limitations. Then Laravel came in and made something much beautiful and more interesting for web developers to use this framework. Now, the other part of Laravel that makes it interesting is that it has the CLI, which is the command line interface that supports artisans operations. So Laravel is quite a big project, and for such a framework, being open source is something very noteworthy of, to give credits to Taylor for not just working on this unique framework, but has been consistently maintaining this framework for over a decade and a half. So this framework, we are not going to talk much about it here today. It's just a brief introduction for you to have an overview of a few things that Laravel does. But in our paid courses, we'll be talking in depth, both history, what it's all about, and a few core foundations of this framework. So having said all this, let's now move on to showing you the links of the essential packages that are required to install this framework and, of course, run it efficiently. So to install Laravel package, we need two essential packages. We need the Composer and we need the Node.js. So to get the Composer installation for your Windows environment, you visit this website. Also to install the Node.js, which is the NPM packages, you also visit the Node.js URL link on this slide. Now, you should note that this is basically demonstrated on a Windows environment, okay? We can also run Laravel on Docker containerization. We can also run Laravel on Linuxes, which is a Linux machine, and other various distros that this framework can support. Okay, so just understand that this installation we are going to focus on today is on a Windows environment. That doesn't mean that you can replicate these installation files, such as the Composer and Node.js, on a Mac environment or Linux environment. Okay. So if you're using a different environment, which is not what we are using here today, then make sure you read through the documentations, outlined on these official URLs and links to understand how to get these various packages running on the distro you are using to learn how to install or run Laravel. So over here, this is the official website to download Node.js, and this is for Composer. Okay, you can see to download the Windows Composer setup.exe, and for Node.js, you can choose your environment, if it's Windows, Mac, Linux, or AIX. Okay, and of course, it's important to know this. For Microsoft has a very strict rule of recent when it comes to installing exe files. So make sure you download this version, which is the .msi, which means Microsoft installer when you try to install the application. Okay. So these files, we've already downloaded it on our machine. We're going to walk you through on how to install it. But first of all, let's open our command prompt. Now, if we type composer v, you can see we have no composer here. And if we type npm v, you can see we have no npm either. Okay, so we can close this. Now let's set up composer. Now when setting up composer, you're going to be prompted with this interface or dialog box. Ensure you select install for all users. Okay, and you click yes. Next, make sure you don't check this box, okay? Because subsequently, when there are newer versions, right, you will want to uninstall this and install the newer versions. So you have to click next, okay? Now, if you watch our previous videos, you're going to see that we have a place where we have modified our version of PHP. However, there are different versions of PHP you want to install this composer, okay? You can select them from the drop down menu, but in our case we want to use our latest version of our PHP, so we don't have to alter or change anything. We just click next. In this case we don't want to use a proxy, so we just click on next, and we click on install, then we click on next, click on finish. Now if we open our terminal again and we click on composer, you can see we now have composer installed, right? Okay. Now the next thing we want to do is that we want to install Node.js. So how do we install? We also click the exe file. You'll be prompted with this. Okay, you click on next. Of course, we have to accept the terms of agreement, and we click on next. It's going to pick up the directory where it wants to install the Node.js. You click on next. Do not alter anything here. Just click on next. Of course, check this box to automatically install necessary tools. Okay, these tools are very essential when you're going to be running the npm install, npm run build, and npm run dev. So you click next, click on install, you click on yes. Now, note that during the installation, your CMD prompt and PowerShell will pop up. It's okay. Just follow the on-screen instruction. There is no harm done onto your PC, as Node.js has to work efficiently on your PC for you to be able to run all these various commands to compile the Laravel files. So we click on finish. Now we have this interface. We just click on enter, enter again, enter. Then these are PowerShell, right? We click on yes. You're going to see something like this. Then you hit enter to exit. Now, if we open our CMD again and we say npm-v, now we have the latest version of the npm, right? Good. Now we're about to install Laravel. So when you want to install Laravel, remember it's like we are running a web application on a web server, right? So we have to go to the root directory, which is the www directory, right? To install this application. So what do? We just say cd. Okay. Now where does our www directory sits? In our WAM server 64, right? So in your case, it depends on where your WAMP server 64 sits. In our own situation, we are sitting on the C drive. Okay. Now we are in there. The next thing we want to do is I want to go into the www directory. So we cd into www directory and hit enter. Good. Now we're here. What do we do next? The next thing we have to do is that we have to now install Laravel. So how do we install Laravel? We now need to use Composer. So Composer is going to pull this repository, compile it, all the necessary PHP file, and of course install Laravel for us. So what do? We say Composer, okay? We say create project. We say Laravel /Laravel. Okay, we give spacing, then we call the name of our project. In our case, we say Fix It Gateway Security. Okay, then we say, okay, let's say Fix It Gateway Security 1, and we say prefer this. Okay, and we hit enter. Now, Composer is going to load all the repository package and, of course, help us to compile it. Okay. So you can see it's installing these packages, right? Compiling everything. Now you can see here, everything has been successfully done. If you want to publish, it gives us a few hints. If you want to migrate the database. Okay, so here you can see the table migration has been successfully done and so on, right? Now we want to run build. This is where it's very important. We cannot run it from here. So we have to cd into the project Fix It Gateway 1 to run build, okay? Which is the npm run build. So we cd into Fix It Gateway Security 1. Okay, then we say npm install $npm run build, and we hit enter. So this is going to compile the CSS, the JavaScript files, and so on. Good. So you can see all, production files has been built, right? So the next thing we want to do is that we want to check our Laravel application. So we can say PHP artisan serve. Okay, it tells us we can access the web application here. Okay, so we can go back here and let's see what does our command line says. Yep, 8,000. Okay, so we can go back here and reload it. Let's see. Now you can see our Laravel, it's running, right? We can also do something different. We can try and see if we can access it using our WAMP server. So we've closed the PHP artisan, right? So let's run our WAMP server. Let's see. Okay, so we have run our WAMP server. Let's see if we can still get it. Good. So we can come here and say 80, 80. Good. So you can see we do not have this running, right? Okay, so we come to our command prompt to say PHP artisan serve. Okay, so we 8,000. Good. So now we have this running, right? Now the next thing we want to do is we want to install Laravel Jetstream. Okay, so you can see here it's just basically the Laravel interface, no functionalities, right? And we don't have the login and so on. But we don't want this to happen. So we want to create something that's so unique, whereby we can see a login form, we can see a register form, and so on. So this is going to populate basically Jetstream pre-installed packages, okay, for ours. So we still go back to our root. Okay, let's close this. Okay, good. So we still go back to our root, which is the Fixed Gateway Security one. Then we say composer. Okay, we say require Laravel / Jetstream. Okay, then we hit enter. So this is going to install Laravel Jetstream for us and update its packages. So you can see everything is getting done. Now, once we are done, the next thing we want to do is that we want to run dev. Okay, so we can say npm install npm run dev. Okay. Now, if we go back here and we go to localhost, let's see. Let's just say localhost. Good. Now you can see when we went to localhost, we have this, right? We have this. So this is our project. Now let's show you the structure of our project. We copy this. We'll say /. Okay. And we hit enter. Now this is the directory. Of course, when we deploy this in a production server or production environment, we're going to hide all these files. We don't want people to have access to, like clicking this and seeing the, migrations, to see what we did. Okay. And of course, seeing the uncaught errors and so on to understand what they have to do. Like if they click this, they know the type of tables that we have, right? And they can enumerate it for SQL injection and so on. Okay, so basically, let's go back. So we just come here, we just say public / and we hit enter. And as you can see now, we have the login, we have the register, which shows that we have populated a few of the Jetstream preloaded packages, or should we say functions, to do this. So if we click on login, so now the reason why we have this uncaught exception, right? You can see is because we do not have this login route created. Okay, so you can see, and also it tells us the SQLite code. So basically, we have to, create the routes and, everything that has to do on the back end. So how do we create these? We can now go back to our project folder, which is this one, Fixed Gateway Security, using our VS Code. Then we can now do some configurations and so on. This is how we get it installed. Okay. And to now create this various auth login and registration, we have to go back, we have to migrate our database. You can see view name is not found, which means we have not created this. Okay, so we have to go in there and of course run some configurations that when we're done, we click on login and we'll see the login form. If we click on register, we're going to see the register form. So this is basically how we can install the Laravel. We intend to show you in our next video how we can populate this so that when we click the login, you can see the login form. And when we click on the register, we can, see the register form. And this homepage is the Blade PHP file. We can also look for this file, change it to suit what we want. Okay, so if we want this to just get away here, from here and design our web page the way we want it, we can now locate this file and of course change the code here, which is the HTML code that is rendered in the blade.php file, and put whatever we want it to be on our front end here. Okay. So that will be all for this week's training. And hopefully you have been able to understand a brief history of the founder of Laravel, the important packages that are necessary to deploy Laravel, and of course, setting up Laravel, mirroring the concept of a production server using web server application. So in our subsequent video, we are going to walk you through on how to create the auth login concepts, create the auth registration, and of course, show you how this works. That when we click on the register link we can be able to see a registration form. And when we click on the login form the login link we have, you can be able to see a login form. So that will be all for this week. And we hope this training was, okay to expose you on how to install Laravel on web server. If there are any little errors when you try to watch these videos you do not understand, please feel free to hit us up on our Discord channel or contact us via our social media such as X and LinkedIn, and we'll be able to reply you as soon as we can. Okay, so thank you for watching and see you next week. Another training of coding and building tools in cybersecurity with Fixie Gateway Security, and bye for now.